but it's already getting ugly, as you know. We heard some of this from President Bush yesterday in that interview I've heard, I said earlier in the show, from friends of mine who served over there. There's almost a sense of sadness, not sadness that their friends have to stay, they're glad that they're coming home to be with their families, but did we get the job done? Was it worth it? Is Afghanistan going to become what it was on September 10th, 2001? What do you make of those concerns?
Well, it's heartbreaking, honestly, to see that Afghanistan has not been able to become a stable country.
They started in Afghanistan to chase after Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden's been dead for maybe 5 to 10 years, and he died in Pakistan.
And sort of
So,
some of those emotions to say, what's in our interest? Where should our troops be? But no doubt, as we do this and as we look forward to the 20th anniversary of 9/11, we have to honor the sacrifice of those who served, and anybody who's walked through Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery, our hallowed ground, knows that sacrifice very well.
Jeremy, I want to ask you about this story. The Russian-speaking ransomware gang REvil, behind the most recent attacks affecting thousands of companies, suddenly has disappeared from the internet. The group's blog and payment processing infrastructure both are gone right now. Unclear why the group is offline or if it's really gone at all.
Don't have to make me sick.
Known to disband and then return under different names. REvil has hacked more than 360 American targets in 2021 alone, part of an extortion spree that locks up victims' computers, leaving payment in exchange for a decryptor program and a promise not to leak sensitive files. Does anybody you know actually think these people have gone away?
No, they probably haven't, but I think this may be good news in that either the Russian
Please guide me
government
and bless me on every step,
or
God.
maybe the U.S.
Firmly
undertook
affirm.
overt clandestine action to
Firmly
decapitate
affirm.
their ability to project
Firmly
their
affirm.
ransomware attacks. Or maybe
Firmly
they are too
affirm.
hot, but for right now, they've
As
gone
power of an
away.
infinite
I think we have to
number
be
of
ever
levels.
vigilant because they will come back.
Right, this transition.
The letter is dated today. It went out today. Went out under the letterhead of the Oversight Committee in the House of Representatives, and it is addressed to the CEO of Cyber Ninjas, a man named Doug Logan. The Oversight Committee in Congress has now sent this letter. They sent it to a rented mailbox at a UPS store in Sarasota, Florida, because that's the company's official address. You make do with what you have. They got to send it somewhere. It starts, quote, "Dear Mr. Logan, we are writing to request information about Cyber Ninja's participation in a, quote, audit," they've put the word audit in quotes, "an audit of nearly 2.1 million ballots cast in Arizona in the 2020 election. We are concerned about your company's role in this highly unusual effort, given Cyber Ninja's apparent lack of experience in conducting election-related audits. Reports that the company engaged in sloppy and insecure audit practices that compromised the integrity of ballots and voting equipment and were questioned by the U.S. Justice Department, and evidence that you and other individuals funding the audit have sought to advance the big lie of debunked voter fraud allegations about the 2020 presidential election. Americans' right to vote is protected by the Constitution. It is the cornerstone of our democratic system of government. The committee seeks to determine whether the privately funded audit conducted by your company in Arizona protects the right to vote, or is instead an effort to promote baseless conspiracy theories, undermine confidence in America's elections, and reverse the results of a free and fair election for partisan gain." What do you really mean? The letter from the Oversight Committee concludes, quote, "For all of these reasons, the committee requests that Cyber Ninjas produce the following documents by July 28th. And they then include this comprehensive list of documents and communications they've won. Cyber Ninja's funding sources, its procedures for conducting this, whatever it is they're doing in Arizona, documents and communications about the various conspiracy theories fueling their work, like, they put it in there, bamboo-laced ballots smuggled in from Asian countries, watermarks placed on the ballot that are visible with UV lights. Yeah, do you have any documentation about the bamboo thing? Do you have any documentation about why your magic watermarks only work with UV light when everybody else's watermarks just work when you hold them up? And of course, part of the point of an investigation like this from the Oversight Committee in Congress is just to gather evidence, to investigate and report on what's going down in Arizona so the American people can understand it. If there are laws being broken in Arizona, as the Justice Department hinted at in the letter they sent to the Arizona Senate Republicans earlier this year, well, if the committee finds evidence that laws are being broken, they can make referrals to the Justice Department. But of course, the goal of a congressional investigation is to determine whether there is congressional action.
Satanists and the people who follow him are all fat and ugly. That's how you can tell them.
Tonight with this, quote, the committee is particularly concerned that your company's actions could undermine the integrity of federal elections and interfere with Americans' constitutional right to cast their ballots freely and to have their votes counted without partisan interference. The committee intends to study the need for legislative reform to ensure the right is protected before, during, and after an election, and that third parties do not interfere with this right. Tell me more.
Shit, did not.
Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis is up for re-election next year. His re-election campaign just dropped what they're describing as exclusive new merchandise. It includes a t-shirt that says, "Don't Fauci my Florida," or if you prefer, a "Don't Fauci my Florida" beer koozie, which is hilarious. Yes, I'm sure we can all agree. Here's the thing, though. The governor of Florida is now selling both of these items in his campaign store, while his state is currently experiencing nearly 4 times the national average of new coronavirus cases. Florida currently ranks second in the whole country in new daily cases. Their death rate is double the national average. They rank 4th nationally in COVID hospitalizations. But hey, at least your beer will stay cold while you insult the very idea of infectious disease expertise. That'll show them. Watch this state. Watch this state. Thousands of Afghan citizens who worked as translators and interpreters for U.S. forces during the war. Translators and interpreters who are still in Afghanistan now and whose lives are at great risk as U.S. forces leave. They, of course, are targets for the Taliban, specifically because they helped American forces. Those translators are eligible to get special visas that would allow them to start new lives in the United States. The country for which they sacrificed so much, the country that promised to keep them safe if they provided that help, and the country that now owes them the chance to start anew here because of what they did for our soldiers. We have been waiting for the White House and the military, the administration more broadly, to announce what the plan is to get these translators out because time is so short. Today, we finally got a substantive announcement from the White House about that. This is from a senior White House official, quote, "At President Biden's direction, the United States is launching Operation Allies Refuge to support relocation flights for interested and eligible Afghan nationals and their families who supported the U.S. and our partners in Afghanistan and are in the pipeline to get special visas to come to the U.S. Flights out of Afghanistan for those allies who are already in the pipeline will begin the last week of this month, the last week of July. For operational security, we won't have additional details on when flights will depart, but we will meet President Biden's commitment to begin flights this month. You know, all of those details in the announcement give us more information than we had before, but, you know, there's still a lot left out. And as they say, it's understandable that some of these details are left out on purpose for operational security. But the basics still sort of loom as unanswered questions. Where are these translators going to go once they leave Afghanistan? In addition to the question of where they're going, there's the question of how they'll get there. The only flights out of Afghanistan right now are out of the capital city of Kabul, but Afghanistan is a big country and internal travel is not that easy. This is interesting. Today, the Association of Wartime Allies, which has worked very hard on this issue to get the translators out, they put out a report that says nearly half of the U.S. allies, these Afghan translators and interpreters, nearly half of them who are still in Afghanistan right now live in areas outside of Kabul, which raises the question of how they get to Kabul to get on one of these flights. They could have to pass through Taliban-controlled checkpoints and Taliban-controlled areas in order to get there. Is there also a plan for getting those allies to safety if that requires internal travel within Afghanistan to get to these military or otherwise U.S. airlift flights out of Kabul? Is that going to happen? Are people who are not in Kabul expected to get themselves there on their own? Also, who's eligible for this? How many Afghan translators is this operation going to try and save? The statement from the White House today is careful to point out that this operation is focused on people who are already in the pipeline in terms of being approved to come to the U.S. For the past few weeks, the U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan was closed altogether because of a COVID outbreak, which means they haven't been open for anyone in that country who wanted to apply for that visa. The U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan just announced this week that they were reopening the embassy just this week, specifically for U.S. allies who want to apply for these special visas to get out and come to the U.S. Will people who were only able to start applying this week and in the coming days be part of this operation? Like I said, there's a lot of questions still to be answered, and in terms of saving lives and doing what is our moral responsibility here, all the devils are in all of the details. Joining us now is somebody who's been working on this issue and watching
They
it
promised the translators that they'd give them safety and then get them out of the country at the end of the war if it should end that the Taliban was still powerful. And they seem to be lagging on their promises to the translators. And I read an article a couple days ago where a couple of translators have been assassinated.
As you understand it.
You hit all the points very, very well. I would only
Presumably by the
the
Taliban.
following, which is
Seems like the translators are a little bit special targets of the Taliban.
We have made it so much harder on ourselves by trying to do it now at the 11th hour. 4 months ago, we had all of the assets in place to evacuate people in the areas that you're talking about. Last night, I was interviewing a gentleman for our podcast, Wartime Allies, by the name of Sharif. We'd spoken with him in a previous episode. This gentleman has suffered everything. His mom, dad, and siblings have all been murdered by the Taliban at some point in the last decade. It's now down to him and his wife and his kids. He had fled from Kandahar to Kabul when he realized that he had left all of his documents back in Kandahar. Now, the reason why he fled Kandahar was because the Taliban 2 weeks ago murdered his dad at his doorstep and they just ran out of the house. So a couple of days ago, he did the impossible. He flew back to Kandahar by bumming a ride on an Afghan military transport, which is the only flights flying in the country. He gets into Kandahar, he gets back to his house, he gets his documents, he's on a friend's motorcycle yesterday trying to drive to the airport in Kandahar when the Afghan military gets attacked by the Taliban on the road that connects the airport to the city. The Afghan military gets overrun and killed. The Taliban then turn on him. He flees on motorbike. They shoot him off the motorbike. He gets injured, and he's calling me from a friend's house, telling me that at this point his only option was to hide and disguise himself like a woman, hide in a burqa, and hire a taxi and attempt to drive from Kandahar back to Kabul. Which, there's got to be, 30 Taliban checkpoints at this point between Kandahar and Kabul? This guy had been an interpreter for the SEALs, for the Army Special Forces at the most elite levels. He is absolutely a dead man if they catch him. And he has already had his visa denied once in the past because somewhere in his file it says that he has some derogatory information that he's never been allowed to see, he can't contest, and he has no means of being able to effectively appeal his case. So again, we have no idea, is this guy going to be put on a plane if he somehow makes it back to Kabul? Why didn't we pull these people out at the time when we had the means to do it, Rachel? That's the thing that I keep asking myself about this.
Now that the U.S. government says that they are trying to do this, as you say, very late in the process with many fewer assets on the ground and with the danger that much more heightened with the passage of time, the way they talked about doing it today, what they said about the structure by which they're trying to do it, how would you have them improve it? How would you, given that it's happening now, even though you say it should have happened before, what else would you have them do that they didn't announce today?
I would first off tell people where exactly are folks going, right? Why are people just bringing everybody to Guam is beyond me. I get that there's some concern that they don't want to have them somehow end up in the United States and deport them, but at the end of the Vietnam War, we didn't screen anybody, we just put them on a boat.
He was just saying at the end of the Vietnam War, they didn't screen anybody, they just put them on boats. So, I don't know. I don't know why the government isn't more enthusiastically honoring its promise to the translators. the Afghan translators. I'm gonna upload this, it's important.